What is up, guys? So in an attempt to like stay on top of scientific research and not just like drown myself in lists of studies that I'm never going to read, I'm going to start actually breaking some of them down and kind of relaying the information to everybody else, because there are lots of cool things once you get past all of the sciencey thingies, which I can't always understand, but I'm going to do the best that I can. I want to do one today that's really, really cool, and I will say I actually did see a science breakdown of this video, of this study prior to now, but I thought there were some other points in the study that were really important, and I wanted to kind of bring those out for my clients and followers, yeah, it's pretty cool. So this is about stress. The study is called The Role of Stress Mindset in Shaping Cognitive, Emotional, and Physiological Responses to Challenging and Threatening Stress, which is a long title, but long titles are da bomb. So some of this I'm just going to read straight from my notes because it actually comes directly from the study. So at the end of the study, they said the goal of the study was to examine how stress mindset would moderate emotional, cognitive, and neuroendocrine responses in the context and challenge of threat evaluation. So basically they were looking at mindset, which is kind of a crazy thing to that scientists can actually study now and like see the effects on the body, but you actually have hormonal responses and somatic and neuroendocrine responses to all types of life events, and stress is kind of what they're looking at here, and how someone's mindset actually affects how they view stress. So the basis of the study was a situation is considered challenging when the individual perceives that they have sufficient resources to meet the environmental demands. Challenge evaluations are typically associated with increased cardiac efficiency and hormonal responses related to thriving and growth, preparing the body for action, and signaling approach motivation, as well as increases in cognitive performance. So basically, if you're looking at a stressor as if you're looking at stress as enhancing, which I'll talk about in a second, you actually have a more positive response, like you're raring to go to approach that stress. So stress mindset, what they're referring to in that is either stress is enhancing versus stress is debilitating. So stress is enhancing mindset usually exhibits, like I said, a more adaptive physiological response, and approach-oriented behavioral responses. So like, I'm going to approach this stress versus like retract from it. Maybe that's kind of a way of looking at it. So stress mindset, though, is not the amount of stress, and they did talk about this a little bit in the study. It doesn't really have to do with the amount of stress or the type of stress that you're really receiving. It has more to do with how you're actually approaching it. So how you appraise and cope with stress, and it focuses a little bit on the nature of the stress itself and how you can actually handle it. The goal of the study was to I swear that's really annoying. The goal of the study was to understand how stress mindset operates in challenging and threatening contexts. So they're using two different types of contexts, either threatening or just challenging. And also how you can improve your stress response without changing the demands of the situation. So like I said, not changing the actual stressor, just changing how you handle the stress. So in the study, they actually took saliva samples like 5 different times, and they were measuring a couple of different hormones, primarily cortisol and DHEA. I have that written down right. So they took the first saliva sample, and they had all these like college, undergrad, and graduate students. They like paid them $20. Paid me $20. They did a 3-minute video. So they had them in 2 different groups, and one group would actually watch a 3-minute video that talked about like the positive effects of stress and used positive music and words and whatever, and basically described stress in a positive light. And the other group watched a 3-minute video, and they used like kind of like bad music and like looked and negative images and looked at stress in a negative light. So they actually had this going into the whole study. They did the saliva samples and then immediately watched this video about how stress affects them and what stress basically is, positive or negative. I think they may have taken another saliva sample then, but I didn't write it down. And then they did a mock job interview. So they had, not only that, they did a mock job interview with an 8-minute speech. They had to get in front of 2 people and do an 8-minute speech, and then a 5-minute Q&A after the speech. Slight interruption. Okay, so they had to do a mock interview with an 8-minute speech and then a 5-minute Q&A right after. But during the Q&A, and maybe during the speech as well, they received by random either positive or negative feedback. So some people who were in the group that watched the video about stress being positive got positive or negative feedback, or in the negative group, if they had watched the video about stress being negative, they got positive or negative feedback. So they're like, yeah, like the interviewers are like leaning in and listening. They're like, oh, that's really good. You're doing a really good job. Negative feedback was like shaking their head, like making angry faces, like you're not being very clear. So yeah, stuff that could really stress you out. And then they took another saliva sample afterwards, and then they did another type of study thing, kind of related, where they measured attentional bias. So based on, they kind of were measuring this based on which video I guess they had watched first, but if I understand correctly, they had to look at a screen and they had like a face pop up, and it had like either a like happy face or sad face or angry face or whatever. And I don't know if they had to classify the faces, I can't remember exactly, but they basically measured how long they actually looked at the faces. So how long they were looking at certain faces with certain emotions. What they did find is that the stress is enhancing group, which are the ones who watched the positive video about stress prior to, the stress is enhancing group released more DHEAS, that's actually what it is, DHEAS, during positive feedback. So DHEAS is is something that's secreted at the same time as cortisol, and everybody knows cortisol because it's like the stress hormone, but both of those are supposed to be released at the same time. Those who were in the stress enhancing group, whenever they were receiving positive feedback, they released both of those hormones. But the ones who were in the stress is negative group were only releasing cortisol during even the positive feedback. They weren't releasing the DHEAS, which I believe is actually something that kind of negates out the cortisol, kind of like balances out the equation so that it's not quite so much stress hormone running through the body. But basically they're looking at how you manage stress, not just in a challenge, but also a threat. So saying that if you have a more positive view of like stress, like looking at as an enhancing thing to your life and not actually a negative thing, it actually will change your your hormonal response to it. So it may not make stressful situations any less emotionally difficult, or even in some cases less physiologically taxing, because cortisol is still high despite any different type of feedback. So like cortisol still being released in stressful situations, but the way that DHEAS is released changes, number one, depending on your mindset, but then it also is affected by your feedback. So if you have other people who are positive around you, that kind of helps too. But the stress is debilitating mindset actually causes individuals to view challenging situations in the same manner as a threat. So I actually underlined this: sometimes evoking worse somatic outcomes than more threatening life events. So these people who are looking at stress as debilitating, they can actually look at just challenging situations and view them more negatively than actually like a threat to them, which is insane. So basically that mindset is a huge factor in determining how your body is physically responding to stress. The other thing about the faces from earlier is that stress is enhancing individuals. They actually gave more attention to happy faces. So they didn't say this in the study, but what I took from that is that may explain like a negative worldview or view on other people if you view stress as debilitating. So I've been around people who, when stress comes into their life, they view it as so negative all the time, and then you can actually see their view on other people. They tend to focus on people who are like really negative, or they focus on other people who are like angry, or they don't spend enough time viewing like giving attention to happier individuals. But this is saying that stress is enhancing individuals, the ones with that positive mindset, will actually spend more time focused on happier people and spend less time focused on negative people. So I thought that was really good as well. So basically the goal of the end result of the study was essentially saying, if you can attempt to view all stressors as a challenge and you can view it with an enhancing mindset, then you will have a better physiological response, which obviously affects your worldview, maybe how you view other people, all that kind of stuff too. So I thought that was extremely awesome. I actually know a number of people that this kind of applies to, because the way that you view stress doesn't just affect like how you handle specific situations. If you know hormones and the crap in the body, like high levels of cortisol, whatever, all of that is it does take a little bit to kind of cycle out. It's not quite as fast as like a neurological response, like just like moving your arms and stuff. Anyway, I thought this was a really good study. I thought that it had a lot of really interesting stuff in it about how your body is affected. And so maybe the takeaway is, if you didn't watch the entire video, try to view stress in a more positive light and know that, you know what, it may be kind of difficult, but I can actually get through this. Like physiologically, it's shown that it's better if you view it that way. And you'll actually be a little bit healthier, because cortisol is kind of bad.